everyone, Paul from the Ask Drone U podcast, co-founder and chief pilot of Drone U. If you're like me and you love flying these things because it puts you in flow state, provides emotional release, or maybe you turned your passion into profit and now it's your job, then you're gonna be really upset and sad to hear about the FAA's new proposed remote ID rules. So what is remote ID? Remote ID was supposed to be the license plate in the sky. It was supposed to be the way to identify operators, intentions, and vehicles in our airways. But most people know if drones were outfitted with the ADS-B system that's very common to the FAA and common to general aviation, everyone knows we would black out the map. Literally. The entire United States would be covered in little dots representing drones. Because while there's 8 million drones in the United States, there's only about 1 million aircraft, so we outnumber them by a lot. Now, the FAA launched their proposed remote ID rules. Before we get into the details, there's been a lot of information out there, and I have even been misquoted myself. That's why I wanted to come to you and make a video and say exactly, okay guys, here are some of the issues with remote ID. You need to be thinking about these issues before everyone starts running and gunning and talking about all the very nuanced parts of remote ID before asking the really smart, intelligent macro questions of, what happened to the proposal from years ago? Why didn't the FAA use the ARC recommendations to create a broadcast-based system? Why are we asking drone pilots to have increased expenses, become part of mass surveillance, and to do this in the name of safety? Aren't drones the safest technology to come out like in aviation history? Aren't there only like 3 actual crashes with drones and aircraft? Okay, yeah, there are. Just making sure. Okay, cool. Yeah, they're safe. Well, if you're like me and you love privacy, but you agree that security is necessary, and you, like me, love to fly and built your business on it, then you now have a responsibility to read this entire document and all the information out there and comment on this NPRM so that it cannot become regulation or law. Regulations and laws are different. We're not going down that path. So let's talk about remote ID. It's supposed to be the license plate in the sky. It was supposed to allow for more advanced operations like drone delivery, BVLOS or beyond visual line of sight operations, flight over people, and many other waivers that would allow drones to do very nuanced and complex operations. But if you actually read the NPRM, in the first 20 pages, it says remote ID won't do any of that stuff. Yeah. Yes, all those YouTubers you watched that said that? Nope. Yep, go read. There are some huge problems with remote ID, and I am not gonna focus on the nuanced, how does remote ID work? How would you work in it? Are your drones actually gonna work in remote ID? The answer is no, because none of the drones work with the serial number system the FAA asked for. So all those, great videos about like, hey, yeah, you can fly your drones. You got 3 years. You're gonna be able to do stuff. Everything will be fine. None of the drones that exist nowadays actually utilize the serial number system that the FAA is asking for. The even weirder part is that the FAA is asking non-certified aircraft to now have standards. Wouldn't that make them certified aircraft? Anyway, back to it. There's a couple other bigger issues, like the fact that the FAA didn't use any of the industry insiders' recommendations for remote ID. Let me ask you this question before we go super deep into remote ID, because it's pretty good question. So why should we implement a monthly expense and burden onto drone pilots for a remote ID system? Remember, this is supposed to be the license plate in the sky, right? Well, hold on. Let me take a Phantom 4 Pro. Oh, you know what? Here's an Advanced. Let's take one of these. Actually, that one's broken. One more. If I take this drone right here, Phantom 4 Pro, it can already broadcast. It already has a license plate in the sky. And in fact, it already showcases its command and control signal link to various outlets that are already monitoring the airways. Yeah, that's right. The FAA already has a license plate system. It was developed by DJI. Great job, DJI. A lot of people who have been afraid of DJI and all their lobbying for the American government really put the proof in the pudding when they put remote ID on most of their drones, which in this NPRM, the FAA says represents almost 80% of all commercial drones. So, is there a drone that you can completely negate remote ID and just not worry about it? You know that Mavic Mini that I was talking a lot of crap about? That drone has a lot more value now there, Bob. Yeah, the Mavic Mini, sub 55 grams. Doesn't need to work with any of this BS. Okay, let's get back to it. So if you're like me, you turn your passion into profit, you love to fly, these rules are very scary. But what if I told you that the entire remote ID NPRM could actually be illegal and may never go through to begin with? The NPRM, remote ID, is it legal? A lot of the legal proponents, AKA not YouTubers, AKA not me, have been saying that the NPRM on remote ID may actually break federal law. Not federal regulations, federal law. If I look at 50 USC 1801 subsection 101, also known as the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, well then I would quickly learn that the collection of domestic wire communications and radio communications from United States citizens is inhibited unless you have a warrant. Okay, so let me ask you this. There's two types of remote ID. We have the broadcast system, the system that already exists, the system that's in these drones right here, okay? This broadcast-based system, it already exists. Drone pilots wouldn't have to pay any more money, and most of the drones that we already fly already work in the system. So why not use a broadcast-based system? It already exists, it's cheap, and it provides pilots privacy. Look, FAA, there's already a license plate program that works really well in this country. Do you know what it's called? The DMV. I know, in New Mexico it's MVD. It could get confusing for you guys. Now, that being said, this license plate system offers a level of protection and privacy for drivers that you and I probably don't even think about. What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the fact that if I accidentally cut off some Yahoo and he can't look up my license plate number and come burn down my house. Thanks, government. Appreciate that protection. Now, the proposed NPRM on remote ID would not have any of those protections. Now, while it does say that law enforcement would have your information, your pilot location, your drone telemetry, and other information, it does not explicitly say that the public would not have this information as well, leaving the door open to say that this information would be available essentially to anyone who would pay for it. Now, that is not in there specifically, I'm speculating. So let me ask you this. We talked about two systems of remote ID. We've got network-based, AKA the internet, and then we've got the broadcast-based, the cheap, affordable license plate system that already exists. So I just talked about pilot privacy, and with the proposed NPRM on remote ID, we wouldn't really have much of that, okay? So the propensity for a fear-mongering person who doesn't like drones coming to attack pilots goes sky high. The fact that people may shoot at drone pilots, which has already happened in California and Florida, goes sky high. Why not just utilize an existing system that already works? When 80% of all of the drones that we're flying already broadcast a remote ID signal, why not make that the standard instead of a network-based system? This network-based system very, very pertinently breaks 50 USC 1801 subsection 101 because it's the mass collection of data on pilots. High privacy, no. You know why that's a problem? What if every municipality, every local county, every government could actually have a means to figure out how much air traffic is going on and where people are taking off from? What if they could tax your access to the airways? What if someone like AirMap, who, I'm not saying they're doing this, but what if someone like them who's already proven to have nefarious intentions wants to become a remote ID USS? The person who's the provider of all this aggregation of data, this mass surveillance, right? Well, first of all, I believe it's illegal for the network standard RID for even to happen because of the Foreign Intelligence Security Act, which was then updated in 2007 and then again in 2017. And would make it extremely difficult for anyone to collect information on people, where they are, their radio communications at any given time because they're American citizens. That's why I also believe that a broadcast-based system is something that we should utilize. It exists, it works, it's cheap, has privacy, doesn't break the law. This is why I believe the NPRM on remote ID will actually never go through, because it breaks federal law, number one, with the standard implementation of network-based remote ID. In addition, the burdens on companies and small business owners and pilots themselves would be so astronomical, it could even inhibit the very efficiency and productivity that drones provide to other industries. Now, if you're like me, you love to fly. You've got to fight this thing. There's a couple things that we can do, but I've got some more other scenarios to give you of why this proposed NPRM is so bad. So what if a company, any company has all of this data that they're collecting on pilots, right? Well, what if law enforcement was having trouble enforcing the drone laws that the FAA now wants them to enforce? How could they aggregate all the data to figure out the hot spots of where all the pilots are flying? How would they be able to differentiate between egregious pilots and good pilots or honest pilots? Probably wouldn't. So where would they go to buy all this information? Remote ID USS. Someone who's aggregating all of this data would be able to sell it to them, so that way they would have a means of enforcement and a means of compliance. Now they figure out where they're flying. Now they figure out if you've flown, then they send you a bill. Yes, I know that local counties, municipalities, and cities cannot control the airspace, but you know what they can control? Takeoff and landing. Look, everyone wants to make money for their town. They have some great, fabulous idea that they want to implement. And frankly, yes, taxes are necessary for us to have this infrastructure. But this NPRM on remote ID does not do anything good for the industry or the infrastructure of the industry as a whole. Look, I'm passionate about drones because I built a business on drones. There are a lot of other people in this industry that don't even have 10 flight hours. So yes, I'm passionate, yes, I'm fierce, and yes, I am upset. So DroneU believes that this fragmentation of the industry, the fragmentation of representation from drone service providers to FPV pilots to commercial UAVs, it's so fragmented that we haven't had a powerful and uniform and organized voice to come back at the FAA and say, you just woke up the monster. I like winking, okay? All right. Look, I have a lot of friends that work at the FAA, and I don't think that this is a product of the FAA. I really think, and the proof is in the pudding, that with all the delays that we've been seeing in the FAA's remote ID, that someone at the security agency was literally like, hold on, that could be dangerous. What if we give them drones with no props? Will that make it safer? Okay, bad idea. Look, I'm all for safety, and I'm all for law enforcement knowing where a pilot's position is. But I'm not for the public knowing that. I'm not for the mass collection of data on drone pilots. Haven't we already learned that lesson with Facebook? Okay, here's the thing. With the proposed remote ID, if we all organize and we respond cordially and thoughtfully, and we reach out to our congressmen and women and our senators, then we have a fighting chance at stopping this RID. Now, I know a lot of people are saying it's only gonna, come into effect maybe 3 or 4 years down the road, but you only have 60 days to comment and fight this unbelievably terrible proposal. To all the security agencies that are probably very, very upset with my video right now, I believe that you can still get security and you can still get privacy without giving up privacy. Meaning, you can get security without giving up privacy. I think it's really easy. Look, most of these drones already broadcast their information. It can be seen on aeroscopes, on the White Fox system. There are so many anti-drone monitoring systems out there that for the FAA to come out and say, we need a way to identify drones. Don't be fooled. There are ways. It's not going to cost us monthly expenses. We don't have to update our drones. We don't have to do any of this stuff. We don't have to inhibit life-saving operations if the drones that we're using wouldn't fall under standard or limited remote ID for everyone who didn't quote me correctly. Anyway, the thing is that this is so complex. This entire proposal is so complex. When you dig into one particular piece of information, you lose the context of the situation as a whole, which is what I think has happened to the entire industry. They're losing the context that this is mass surveillance, there's no pilot privacy, it could cause massive potential problems in the future, even inhibiting takeoff and landing in certain areas. Now, I don't know about you, but I believe in America. I believe in an America where we can believe what we want as long as we don't push it on other people. I believe in an America with freedoms and liberties. And I also believe that this remote ID, or the proposal on remote ID, really, really inhibits a lot of these American liberties that we have. Why? All in the name of safety? Wait a minute. 8 million drones, 3 crashes. It's a lot. Now look, I'm not as succinct as some of the other YouTubers out there, and I am not the most put together, stoic individual. But I care deeply about flying, and I care deeply about being able to make memories like what you see behind me, okay? Now, here's the thing. You got a comment, reach out to the congressman or ma'am. Also, reach out to your senator and make sure you share either this or some other piece of information on the NPRM. Now, lastly, Drone U is really upset. Why are we upset? Well, the FAA kind of dropped this bomb during Christmas when they knew everyone was on vacation. It also goes to show how bifurcated the entire industry is when you had a few people sending out tweets about how great remote ID was. Fail, 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 don't join that association. Here's the fact. You guys need real information and resources so that we can fight this. So Drone U has said, okay, let's take all the information and let's provide some guides for people so that they can help understand some of the problems, macro and micro. They can also understand how to comment. That way, with these guides, we can have a unified and uniform direction of fighting this terrible proposal. So go to the Drone U website, check out the blog, and search NPRM or remote ID. We're coming up with a page that's going to have all of our podcasts and articles from Gene Robinson, from Vic Moss, and myself talking about remote ID and what you should do to comment. So make sure you check that out. We are having a webinar, so that way if you have any questions or discovery, we can go over them. So please make sure to join us. That is going to be Friday the 6th. I know that's tomorrow. I got to get this video up today. So make sure to join us. I'll put the webinar link below. If you don't see this video in time, that's fine. I will drop the link in for the resources page for the NPRM on remote ID. Now, if you're an FPV pilot, if you're an RC plane pilot or helicopter pilot, do not give the standard response of RID of how is the FAA going to enforce this. When I've talked to RC plane pilots and helicopter pilots, because there's a field right here, all of them are like, how's the FAA going to enforce that? And like, wow, that's a very good poignant question. And yes, you do have a very, very good point, the one that we're all aware of and very few people talk about. The fact is that if we bend over now, we're going to take it over and over and over and over and over again if these rules get in place, because they lay the foundation for a really nefarious network of rules that really make drone flying harder. Can you imagine if someone who has a dream of flight is scared to take flight because of some rules that don't make sense, or they're so complex they don't know where to get started? That's where we're literally going to. Do you remember when you were a kid and you thought of the first time that you would take to the skies? Because I remember the first time that I took to the skies. And every time thereafter, my eyes continue to look up. Because once you've experienced flight, you'll never forget it. If you love to fly, it's time for you to comment on the NPRM and remote ID. I don't think this version of remote ID should even go through. Am I pro remote ID? Would I like to see remote ID? I would like to see a broadcast-only based remote ID. Why? Well, because then all the drones that I have will work. And also, it's not mass surveillance, and I don't need to be connected to the internet. Because if you look at page 288 of the document, it talks about when internet is initiated and then dropped, broadcast is okay. So why not just make broadcast the standard? On that bombshell, I leave you. Thank you so much for supporting us in the show. Please like this video, subscribe, check out our podcast, Ask Drone U, and if you have a question, go to askdroneu.com. My name is Paul, and this is my awesome classroom because I love helping other people.